In the south side of Fort Wayne, I serve at Holy Scripture Lutheran Church, one of two churches in Fort Wayne. And our church is the smaller of the two. We worship right around 30 right now. It wasn't much higher pre-COVID. The North Church is about roughly double our size. But that's kind of just a general description of our church and size.
Yeah. And how long, I'm sorry, I haven't had my second cup of coffee yet. How long have you been there?
About 5.5 years. So it'll be 6 years this summer.
Okay. Well, hopefully Mary Beth's got some great ideas for you this morning. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you say your congregation is at an outreach perspective?
Well, we were more active in previous years. I would say the most active we've been during COVID is probably on the digital scale.
Okay.
We've been amping up doing live stream and getting digital resources out there. So yeah, to answer your question, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say we're at maybe a 5.
Okay.
I think there would be need for good improvement. We're in the middle of reorganizing our bylaws and our leadership. So once we're implementing that, we're hopefully going to revamp some things with possibly some new leadership over evangelism as well.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, with Faith Unleashed Consulting, I've been a huge advocate of people thinking about hiring part-time staff on occasion, and Mary Beth is just a beautiful example of that. So Mary Beth, maybe you can tell Pastor Brenner a little bit about what drew you to the role originally at Trinity.
I retired from banking after 36 years, my one and only job. And Trinity had a pastor vacancy before Pastor Cook. And we also had a staff minister that left Trinity, took a call, and that position was not going to be replaced with a staff minister. So I kind of came to Pastor Taliano and said, hey, I have an idea. I did community events for 25 years at the bank because I was a branch manager. So I was always promoting the bank in the community, going to parades and chamber events and any festivals. And I said, with this vacancy or not replacement, would church consider a part-time employee to do those events? And in addition to that, I can help greet because our staff minister greeted every Sunday at church. I'm worshiping every Sunday anyway, not all 3 services, but I was worshiping. And I kind of created a job for myself. But as soon as I said it, Pastor Taliano's eyes just got really big, and like he finished my sentence before I even got done selling myself. And we ran with it, and the board approved it.
Yeah, I always think Mary Beth's story is really interesting because she had that initiative. She was willing to go forward and say that. But I'm also going to flip that on us just for a second, because sometimes there's people in your church community already that don't necessarily love their job, whatever they might be doing. And so sometimes we don't ever even consider asking them for something like this. But I often wondered if we had approached Mary Beth with this idea, would she have bit at it, still having a job, but saying, hey, no, this is a better job. And we just experienced that up at Christ in Big Bend. They were looking for a church secretary, and their member ministry coordinator said, I know the perfect person, but she's got a job. And I said, go and, just ask her, ask. And so many times we're afraid to do the ask, but that's, so often the opportunity. So Mary Beth, about how many hours a week are you working?
I work anywhere between 10 and 20, depending on what's taking place. Obviously, there's not a lot community things with COVID, the past 10 months. But that's usually about what I work.
Yeah. And how long, Mary Beth, have you been doing it?
I have been doing it 2.5 years.
Okay.
So.
And maybe you can explain for Pastor Brenner some of your primary roles and responsibilities.
Sure. I greet on Sunday mornings. I open the door for the members as they come in, and I make it specifically, I'm always seeking out guests. And if I see someone I don't know, whether they're a guest or maybe a member that just hasn't worshiped in a while, I introduce myself and, get to know them. And I'm very intentional about making notes right away, whether I come here in the office or I have a little piece of paper back there by the ushers and I write notes. So that's my role on Sundays. In addition to that, I partner with Pastor Italiano and Pastor Cook with new members. If they're interested in joining our Trinity family, I reach out to them. I get the initial, name, address, everything that we need at the church, and then partner with all the communication back and forth about the classes. So those, in addition to the community events, are my primary roles.
Yep. So Mary Beth, how do you kind of keep this outreach focus intentionally in front of the congregation?
And with the congregation, anytime I'm doing something, whether it's an event, we just recently started a blessing box, which is a little mini pantry here at church. I reach out to them through Sunday worship. I'll have pastor do announcements. I utilize our church newsletter saying, hey, I'm getting ready to do a parade. Anybody want to help me prepare the little bags and the little invites for worship, for the handouts for the parade? It's really just reaching out, and I ask them, even Sunday when they come into church, if I kind of have what they tell me, I have like my own little sweatshop that I just approach them.
Mary Beth, I don't know if that's a Christian word.
Well, that's what some of the guys tell me it is.
Yeah, I know.
They may be sweating when they're doing the work. But.
There you go.
Yeah. But I just ask them if they'll help me. So it's just asking, and I'm not afraid to ask. So.
Yeah. So we're going to just dig into some of Mary Beth's outreach ideas that she shared over the course of the last 2.5 years that she's been there. So Mary Beth, I'm just going to kind of hand it off to you, and you take us through some of the things that you've done.
Okay. I think the ones that I would really like to highlight on the most outside of the community events, because starting with that, the one thing that I'm intentional about doing is instead of standing behind the table at community events, I stand in front of it. And whether it's we're promoting maybe a fun activity, maybe a church picnic, or maybe vacation Bible school, I'm in front of that table and just talking to them, introducing myself and saying, my name's Mary Beth. I'm here from Trinity Lutheran Church here in Crete. I'd like to give you some candy and some information on our upcoming vacation Bible school. And it's just that easy, but I'm intentionally in front of that table, right in the path, like not in the middle of the walking path, but right in front of on the side of the path.
So you're not waiting for them to stop, is what you're saying, Mary Beth. You're
right. And I just think I always felt at the bank too, if I was in front of the table, you're kind of in front of them in a way, and just being intentional about that you're not standing behind a table and hiding maybe. So in addition to that, something that we just did this year with COVID, we had a reverse trick or treat. So we reached out to families here in the congregation. Some families donated candy. Some families signed up to be in a caravan of cars. And we drove to homes, about 40 homes between Crete and Steger, and a caravan of 10 cars threw candy to them in front of their home. And I had all of the parents' cell phones in my phone. And when we were about 5 minutes away, I was texting each stop, we're coming, be ready, be out on the curb. So we just kind of drove by, we threw the candy, and I was in the lead car. So I had someone throwing out some information, and then the rest just threw out handfuls of candy. And I think it was very successful. When we were in the village of Steger, I asked the fire department to join us. So we had a fire truck taking us around town. And I had a lot of positive feedback from friends of mine that live in Steger that said, hey, Mary Beth, we want to help next year. And they're not members of Trinity. So it's just those little pieces where I always think of it as I'm planting a seed. You know, maybe you might have a church home, maybe you're already worshiping, but if you're ever unhappy or looking for a change, I'm hoping they're thinking about Trinity for their first choice.
Mary Beth, if I can just interject, one of the real blessings for us with Mary Beth is she's worked for the school district. And so the Stager, the public school district, so she's got all kinds of connections there. She's been involved with Kiwanis and just built all of these relationships, like with the fire department and stuff like that, where she can just pull in and say, hey, would you guys be interested in partnering with me on this? And I think that's really cool. And so just thinking about who is there maybe in your church that's got more community connections is also just like a quick fix that maybe they don't ever make the connection for you. But like Mary Beth said, she had people who weren't even part of our church that wanted to be part of this. And she's just planting the seeds. So going about, how do I, just help them see, hey, this is an interesting church and I'm intrigued by what they do and how they're reaching out to the community. And so there's always that opportunity that it may not be that they don't have a church home already, and we're not interested in steep shilling. I'm doing good. Sheep stealing. Keep drinking your coffee, Lori. But it's just, again, helping them know who we are as the body of Christ at Trinity. So, all right, Mary Beth, that was an awesome one, the reverse trick or treat. And so one of the things you've told me is that you really like to appeal to kids because
Yes.
parents follow their kids, right?
Yes.
And so other ideas on what you've done to reach out to the community for kids?
One thing that I've done last year summer, I wasn't able to do it because of COVID, but prior to that, Crete has a car show every year, all summer long. So there again, about 6 weeks before Vacation Bible School starts, I'm there with my table, in front of the table, having something fun for the kids to do and promoting Vacation Bible School and inviting all the kids to Vacation Bible School. And our first summer from going to community events and going to the car shows, our Vacation Bible School enrollment was around 120. And I would say about 40% of them were non-Wells, non-Trinity members. It's the highest non-Trinity family attendance we've ever had at church that Pastor Italiano shared with me. And I'm not saying it was just because of that, but again, like Lori shared with me, working in the public school district, I had families here from the school district, kids from school that came, that some of them had never ever been in a church, and they were going home and giving testimonies to their parents about what they learned. And that really warmed my heart because they had that experience. And then they came back this past year and did our virtual one, which everything went home, but they came and picked it up and, they did it at home. And the other thing about the children is same thing. I'm very intentional about learning the children's names. With me not being here in Trinity in the school, I don't know the kids. So I'm very intentional about learning their names. Pre-COVID, they came over every Friday for chapel. And I was here when they came. I held the door for them. I was greeting them. I was saying good morning to them. And now they've come over 3 times, I think, this school year we're in currently. They just started after Christmas. And it's cute because every once in a while I hear a "Hi, Miss Mary," so a couple of them know me. But I think the big piece is just, I really encourage knowing the children, because parents go where their kids are welcome. Parents go where their kids are happy. Parents like their kids to be loved. And it's encouraging too for even the seniors to love the kids, because sometimes, I think possibly the seniors might not always like someone fussing, and it's okay to fuss, to be accepting and to love. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I know one thing that you shared with us, Mary Beth, was the idea that you joined the Chamber of Commerce. I'm just curious, Nate, if that's something that you've done, and if there's value to that for you where you're at.
Yeah, so we're on the south side of Fort Wayne, and we're technically closer to an entity called Waynedale, which is part of Fort Wayne, but it's its own identity. And they have a chamber of commerce that was set up about 3 or 4 years ago, and I wasn't aware of it until about a year and a half ago, and I'm wanting to join it, but they're not currently meeting because of COVID.
Of course.
Yes, I've looked into it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I don't know, Mary Beth, are you part of the chamber in both Crete and Stager?
I'm not in Stager. They don't really have an active chamber. Their functions are done. They partner a lot with Kiwanis, and that's why I've stayed with Kiwanis, because and not only that, a lot of the trustees, the mayor, they're all in Kiwanis. So I kind of had made my choice to remain in the Kiwanis Club, and I've been in it for 25 years. So that's kind of where I have all my connections. In addition to, I also work part-time at the school district. So
she's a busy lady.
Like
And she makes things happen, which is really, really cool.
And just to share, it's kind of a cute little story. Our most recent family that joined Trinity is my boss in the school district. And it's kind of on Sunday mornings when I have pastor standing there and I have my boss standing there, I'm like, oh, I don't know about this.
All good, Mary Beth. All good. You're doing a great job. So some of those other ideas, the things that you've done to reach out into the community, or even some of the ideas that you're thinking about in the future.
Something that we just did in October through memorial money, I wanted to do a mini pantry, and I kind of threw it out to the Board of Outreach that it was kind of an idea. It was something I had seen online that a church had done, I think possibly in Ohio. And with us we're just a couple blocks, well, you know, from downtown, the main downtown. But I thought that possibly there was a need for that. So we went ahead with that, and I have a picture of it I can show you. And currently I'm filling this 3 times a week. So a lot of times, as fast as I fill it, it's being depleted. I have members that have signed up to take turns for the commitment to fill it and monitor it. And I also have a team of members that grocery shop for it. So it's currently it's self-sufficient, but that was something that is new for us here at Trinity. Things that I'd like to do, I'd like church to possibly have a blood drive here at church in our fellowship hall, that would bring people into our fellowship hall, not necessarily into church, but on our property, in our building. Something else that I've reached out to, I'm also an election judge. I've reached out to the coordinator of our election judge to see if Trinity possibly could be a polling place in our fellowship hall. That there again, we have a lot of room. And my primary thought on that one was, as an election judge, before COVID and now during COVID, our last election, some of those election judge polling places aren't real big. You know, they have those little booths right next to each other where we can really spread that out here at Trinity. So that was another thing. Another thought I have is, if there's organizations in the community, we have some organizations that do fundraising maybe for families that have had a fire or maybe a death in the family, and they have spaghetti dinners or maybe a pancake breakfast, to use our fellowship hall. We have great access to come in and out. Even they just did one, they did do one in the fall, and it was a drive-through because of COVID, but just drive in, they gave them the bag and they drove out. And there again, I was here and I heard people say, I never knew this church was here, or what a nice building, or what a beautiful stained glass windows. So there again, it's just, you know, being warm, being inviting, being intentional, getting to know them, have conversations with them, and planting that seed that maybe Trinity will be their choice if they're looking for a new church home.
Yeah, I remember, Mary Beth, when you were talking about that, when Angels on Assignment were there, just they even had kids or something that were like, wanted to look around.
Yes.
that there were, somebody else took them on a little tour and showed them the sanctuary and stuff like that, because they had never been in a facility like that before. So
Right.
just, again, getting them on our campus. I think Mary Beth and I were classmates. So if that tells you anything, we both went through Trinity Lutheran School when that was what it was called, before Illinois Lutheran School. And we were about staying away from other people, and it was like, where's the outreach in that? It was kind of like keeping to yourself, versus now just bringing people on our campus, getting people to know who we are and what we do, and not use the Jesus hose on them, as I'd say, but just that building of relationships. And what a blessing that is to watch Mary Beth kind of lead the charge on this. But as you can see, while she's leading the charge on it, she's also not doing it by herself. So she had the blessing box idea, and then she got a team of people to do that. So it was like, to give herself more space to grow and come up with new ideas, she's got to be able to hand those off so that she can continue to be creative and effective the way that only Mary Beth can be, it seems, right now in our.
And the other thing that I'd like to share, Lori, is the parade. We in 2019, the Memorial Day parade, I had talked to the Board of Outreach, and there again, being at the bank for 25 years, we were in the parade every year, right? So when we were walking back to the bank, I'd see all this garbage all down the main drag because the candy wrappers got thrown, and maybe somebody didn't pick up the Tootsie Roll they didn't want. And we came up with a team, and we reached out to a member here at Trinity that works for Will County supervisor, and he brought little grabbers. And I'd say maybe about 16 to 20 people signed up. And when the parade was done, we were down at Zion, because it kind of ends down at our Zion Lutheran Church that's on the south end of town. We were down at Zion watching the parade, and when it was done, we walked the whole parade route back to where it started. And we had on the back of our t-shirts, it said Trinity Lutheran Cares, and we picked up the whole parade route. And there was quite a few posts on Facebook. Did you see those Lutherans out there picking up the garbage? So, but there again, it was just being in the community. We didn't pass out any information. We were in the community just picking up. And to tie that in about garbage, picking up garbage, our Faith in Action Day, which another ministry handles here at church, but they intentionally invite Crete, our public high school, and they have the football players come, and the football players help a team here that's been assigned to go out in the community and pick up garbage. So it's just bringing the community in to partner with us on our events if they're willing to help us. And all it is an invite.
Yeah. And Pastor, you may have heard about that Faith in Action Day. That was part of what started out a member ministry with just a first serve opportunity. So an opportunity where people could, if they hadn't been serving at all within church, they could come just for that one morning, even if it was an hour or two. It usually runs between like 8:30 and 12:30, and get involved and help in one particular area. And when I launched that originally at Trinity, my goal was to move us outside the walls of our church. And so literally I stood there the very first time, and I'm like, we're doing ministry and we're not inside the walls. We're helping people just get connected and be familiar with who are these people from Trinity Lutheran Church, instead of just staying all encompassed. And so as the years have progressed, serving in our community and in the world as a whole, as well as serving our church members in our school, those 4 are the key areas of Faith in Action Day and how we try to make that happen. And now Melissa, who's replaced me at Trinity, she has come up with some more ways. And with Pastor Italiano being the chaplain for our fire department, that has also built some more bridges into the community of how we can effectively serve together, help people understand that we're here to share Jesus, to be light without the Jesus hose, just that building relationships with people. So that kind of leads into our next question, Mary Beth. So just what is your ultimate goal as you think about outreach, and what does that look like?
Well, one of the main things that I want to continue to focus on is continuing to partner with members here in church that have the same love for outreach as I do. And just to continue to try to seek and find opportunities and different things where we can invite people into church and partner in the community to be visible. Because I still think, even though I lived in Crete my whole life, that people just don't always know that we're here.
Yeah. The things that you've talked about, Mary Beth, too, is, you know, you see your role as just getting them to know that we're here, getting them through the doors, but that it's pastor's responsibility to be able to communicate the message. So you don't get into too much of the Jesus hose kind of idea. And that phrase comes out of a book we're going to talk about in a little bit, but, you know, trying to inundate people with sharing Jesus necessarily, but building the relationship first.
Absolutely. And I really, I've had that conversation with Pastor Talion when I first started. I said, you know, I'm going to get them in, but it's your responsibility to move the Holy Spirit with them for them to continue to worship with us. I can be the warm, friendly greeter and run out with an umbrella in the rain and hold the door for them and do the best I can, that they feel like, you know, I might not be sure about the message that I just heard, but I can't deny how I felt or how I was treated when I came through the door. And because you never know. I mean, even I'm very intentional, even with baptisms. I'm very intentional with confirmation, because I want them to feel welcome. And that, you know, and if I know there's a baptism and I know the ushers, I know all the ushers by name, or some of the board members here at church, or some like Lori and Al, I'll say, today we're having a baptism, just to kind of say, hey, everybody, help me greet them, you know, or after I greet them, follow up. And Lori's great at that. I mean, she does that. She'll sometimes come up right behind me and then have a conversation. And I really think if they feel welcome, that's planting that seed that, hey, maybe we're going to check this church out again on our own, other than the baptism, or maybe other than the confirmation where they're the godparent and they're coming to see their godchild get confirmed.
Yeah, I think so many times it's just making them comfortable, first of all, in the building, you know, that it's a strange experience for them right off the bat, and they feel like outsiders. So how do we make them feel like they're welcome, you know, because it's such a strange foreign environment for some people when they're coming in for the very first time.
Absolutely.
So Mary Beth, you want to just talk about how you keep track of all of these connections that you make with people, both people that you might come through the doors, but also the first time people that are maybe a connection that you made through that reverse trick or treat, or those kinds of things.
So if they're a guest for worship, we have, I call it a connection card because that's what Pastor Cook calls it. But it's the standard where you put your name and your address and a phone number. And on ours, it talks about if you're a member, if you're visiting for the first time, and then it ticks up to the second, third. And then there's also a box for if you're interested in membership. So pre-COVID, when we were filling these out, this is what I used. They would put them in after the offering, they would collect them. So I would come back to the back of church and get them from the ushers, and I'd quick rifle through them. Before COVID, there were services that we had 200, 220 worshipers. So I would always look for a guest one and I'd pull it, and then I'd kind of figure out where they were sitting based on everybody else that I did know.
This was before church ever got out, if you didn't catch
before church got out. Exactly. Yeah. Oh no. And so then when they came out, I was ready. You know, I knew their name. I knew who they were sitting by. I could figure it out. If they didn't fill out a card, I would approach them. But this was this is what I call my kind of like my little index cards. So once I have these, depending on what their, if it was their first visit, after, no matter what, I would send them a card, a little church stationery card, and I would just write them a little note and mail it off right away. And then from there, I send out, anytime we have a new sermon series, I introduce the sermon series and the dates and what those sermon series topics are. And I get that from Pastor Italiano. And any newsletters church has, our monthly newsletter, I mail those to all the guests. It's very intentional. I use that word a lot, but it's intentional and it's consistent, and I keep track of it all on the back of the card. I write down sent January newsletter, and I just do little ticks for every month, and the sermon series. And I just keep using those cards. So if they continue to worship, I put the one behind the other, and I just keep them all alphabetically filed.
So Mary Beth, also talk a little bit about like when you got some of these names from the trick or treat trail and the people that you connected with from there.
So,
how do you track those people?
Trick or treat trail, and I'm going to also tag that in with Vacation Bible School because they kind of mirror each other. When we have Vacation Bible School and the trick or treat trail, they have to register, right? Because we need to know where their home is to take the candy.
And they're doing that online, right?
They're doing that online through our church program here at Trinity. And it's kind of like a reservation where they say, hey, I'm going to be sending my kid to Vacation Bible School. It has their address, it has their email, and it has their phone number and the child's age. So once I have that in the system, I have them saved as Vacation Bible School. I have them saved as the reverse trick or treat trail. And so anytime we have anything with children, pertaining to children, whether when we have our church picnic again, when we have the reverse trick or treat trail, we're working on an Easter egg hunt this spring, I just email all of them. I just go right in and I email and I say, hey, you joined us for our reverse trick or treat trail. We have this planned. If you'd like to join us, register again. And then I just keep compiling off all those lists and just keep sending out emails and reblanketing those people on anything that is children oriented. When we started our new program for children, the Trinity Treehouse and Timbers, in placement of Sunday school, I did the same thing. We have a new children's program. You're welcome to join us. And I blanketed out by email.
So Pastor, any questions for Mary Beth on just things that she's done in terms of how far we've gone?
Yeah, just through my head the whole time, just kind of comparing our ministries and our location. I was with reaching out to the community. I was curious how many of the members are in the general Crete area, just an estimation, versus how many are traveling 20 plus minutes to get there.
So I would tell you that from my perspective, I would say it's about, there's a large number that come right from the immediate community, but we also have people that are moving to Indiana. So they are coming from 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of got both.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I would
what's
say
your
the same.
situation?
Well, I would say I can think of maybe 2 or 3 families that live within like a mile radius of church, or 2 miles or 3, and the majority travels 20 plus minutes. So our members are not in the local community. So a lot of our members don't have those connections right away that you may have. And even I live 15 minutes away from church. So I'm more intentional on being in this community, even though my house is 15 minutes away. So I'm trying to be more intentional in our local community with that. I'm trying to move our people to commit and to volunteer, to invest time in our community as well.
So when you look at your radius of people that you serve, is it that 20-minute radius? I mean, is that pretty much what you feel like where you're reaching people?
Yes and no. All of our members are kind of like their own little. Well, they just live that way, and they're in a completely different community. Because Fort Wayne's 250,000 people, and so they're all over Fort Wayne, at least on the south side, or they're in smaller communities south of Fort Wayne. Some have been involved in the greater Fort Wayne community, but that's for our size of church. I just feel like that is too big of a bite to chew. So I've been looking more towards our local community and something that our size of congregation can focus on and serve. And that's kind of been the vision that I've gotten here from some of our leadership, but we just haven't found a good plan or taken action with that because we realize our problem, we're all spread out, and the time commitment for a lot of our members is not there to try to do this.
So you talked about, tell me the name of that local community that you talked about, Fort Glen?
It's called Waynedale.
Waynedale, huh?
Yep. See,
I need more coffee. This is never my good time of the day. Waynedale. So about how big is that?
I don't remember the exact population, but I'd say they maybe have around 1,000 to 3,000 people there. But like I said, it's kind of part of the Fort Wayne area. You don't go much farther north, and you're part of the greater Fort Wayne area. Technically, I think Fort Wayne is on their address, but they like to keep their own identity. One of the post offices is here, and they have their own local shops and everything, local Main Street.
So are they a growing community? I mean, is the suburb becoming bigger?
This part of Fort Wayne is not necessarily growing.
Okay.
There are other parts of Fort Wayne that have been growing, but not necessarily this Waynedale area, but kind of across the river to the east. So there's been a lot more positive news about trying to revamp that part of Fort Wayne. There used to be a nice big mall and everything, but it just went downhill probably about 20 years ago. And so the area is not necessarily growing, and I haven't been able to get a lot of community contacts to see how the businesses are doing in the Waynedale area either. I know a lot of them were closing already before COVID hit. But there are a lot of mom and pop shops. They have their own newspaper, the Waynedale News, and that's kind of been my main community contact there. A couple brothers that run this newspaper that it's free. It's a free newspaper, but they only get money from those who sponsor in there. And so we've sponsored in a way, putting our church advertisements in there. And so that's been kind of my starting point to get into the community, because they already have a lot of community contacts.
Yeah. So one of the fun things, Mary Beth and I never talked about this, that I saw that one church was doing just as a means of supporting the local restaurants in the area was that they were doing takeout Thursdays. And they had something going on at church already that night, a Bible study or whatever. And so they started calling it Takeout Thursdays, and they'd encourage all their members to take out from one of the local community churches. And then somehow or another made it known that, they were promoting Takeout Thursdays in their community as part of the way for the churches to support the local restaurants, kind of thing. And I thought that was an interesting way to build that relationship with your restaurant owners, and so that they, again, know that you're there in the community. So do you have a lot of competition from other churches in the area?
Yeah, Fort Wayne is kind of known as the city of churches. That's one of the nicknames.
Okay.
And Fort Wayne is a big Missouri Synod hub. They have a seminary here. So we're one of two Wells churches, and we're competing against huge Missouri Synod churches that have a nice school district and everything. And so just in the Waynedale area, there's at least two Missouri Synod churches. There's a Catholic church, United Methodist Church, and various other churches in that area. And and being cautious here too, there's already a push between a lot of these churches to kind of join together and do ministry together.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I've kind of had to ease off a little bit on getting involved with them and trying to do our own thing in Waynedale. So that's been an obstacle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea of how can you leave your mark, on the church, whether it's like Mary Beth said, cleaning up after the parade, being the people that care about the community, being the ones that are known for something, is really
Mhm.
helpful, where it's you start to build that reputation. Oh yeah, those guys are the ones that are going to have the hot chocolate on the corner on Christmas Eve or whatever, so that you build a long-standing, oh yeah, we can count on them to do this piece kind of thing.
There is one other thing I'd like to share with you too, Pastor. Something that I've done that I didn't even mention with Lori when we were, when I was talking to her about things that I've done. We have our Lutheran high school, but we also have children, young adults that don't attend the Lutheran high school, that maybe go to, in the area, the public high schools. And something I did last year was she's a senior now, and obviously with COVID, it's not taking place. But when she's in band, and they had like a big band and a high school musical, and I reached out to Pastor and said, "Hey, could we put an ad in their program and just say, Dana, let your light shine." She comes to worship. She's in our praise. She sings in our blended services here at Trinity, and we did that. We put that ad in the program, and that, it's just trying to think out of the box, but saying Trinity Lutheran Church, and Dana, like I said, is now a senior. The kids know her, and she's brought some of those fellow classmates and band members to church to worship with her. So maybe there might be a high schooler in the congregation. And the other thing, when you talk, and I understand with the membership not being as large as ours, but possibly think of just, a mailman or a librarian, or just maybe someone in the congregation that might have those connections. A bankers, I mean, obviously that's what I did, but banker, postal carrier, the mailman knows everyone. And even though the radius is large, which I understand that, maybe if there's just that one person that has some of that background, that maybe is retired even, that maybe has a heart for it, to help make the connections, and maybe opportunities can come from that.
Yeah, I'll just play off of that a little bit too, Mary Beth. That idea of building a relationship with the mayor in the community.
Yeah.
Just saying, hey, could we go to lunch? I'd love to just learn a little bit more about the town or the history of the town or whatever, so that you make that contact. Or village employees.
Yeah.
I have to giggle. We have more of our people working as village employees now than ever before. Our local Methodist church for years had a reputation of having all the village employees. And now I'm seeing some of that shift over, where it is some of the Trinity residents. And so they're starting to demonstrate that they care about the community, and they care about where we're at. And it's not just our church, our school, but it's, how are we involved in the community and care about the community? Because there's this quote, are you a good church in your community, or are you a good church for your community? And I think that we all want to be a good church for our community, as well as we're sharing Jesus with people, as we're helping to build, hopefully, a Christian culture in that community, that we have to take the step outside of our walls in order to do that. And it's those initial steps.
Pastor, do you know if some of your members or maybe your board have read the book People Are the Mission?
Not that I know of, and I'm not even sure if I've heard of that.
I can get back with you to it on who wrote it, but Pastor Italiano had me read that book, and in that book is where, it talked about going out there with the umbrella when it rains, and just certain things like being intentional. And
Yep.
that's where I kind of planted some of these seeds for me. But I'll, either I or Lori will get you that information. And I think it's something to build on. And just to read and give you ideas,
Yeah.
So.
And how do you start to build that mission mindset, that outreach mindset
Yes.
in your congregation, So since we're talking books, I'll throw another one out. Mary Beth and I, since it's you, we're just we're gonna wing the end of this. But Kendall also shared with our small group the book Joining Jesus on His Mission. And that's where this fire hose concept comes from, or the Jesus hose. Don't use the Jesus hose on people. Just build those relationships. Start with the connection, because the concept, you have to touch someone's hand before you can touch their heart. That idea that you have to build that personal relationship first before they're even going to care what to share with them. So both of those, I think, were really good. I don't know if you have, whether it's Sunday morning, that you could incorporate some of that. We have gone to using a lot of books for discussions for Bible study around here as well, to help. Our small group is a group of leaders that meets at our house on Tuesday nights. And it's like, hey, you guys, if we aren't learning how to do outreach better, how can we expect the rest of the members at our church to do outreach better? And let's face it, go make disciples. That's the mission, that we're not supposed to stay and make ourselves comfortable and just get ourselves fed. We're supposed to tell other people about Jesus. So how do we do that? We have to build those relationships first. And so that's part of what we've been working towards, is just how do we do that? I'm going to ask a personal question, and you can say, Lori Lorig, you're going down that path. But I was just presented at two churches, multi-site down in Texas, and we did a spiritual gift assessment. We had 25 of their leadership in the church, and we said, how many of you, who has the gift of evangelism? And literally it was the two pastors and their wives, and that was it. In the group of 25, there was nobody else. And it was kind of eye-opening. So sometimes the question is, people have a tendency to think because you're a pastor, you should have all the gifts, and we know that nobody has all of the gifts. So Mary Beth and I were known to be the chatty Cathys in school, like we were always getting in trouble for talking, maybe. Not necessarily to each other, but just we were the chatty Cathys. So
do you have any salesmen?
No.
Well, the reason I asked that is because in a way, I saw myself at the bank as a salesperson, right? Because you were trying to bring in business and sell products. That's why I asked that question.
So I think it's also important for you to understand that a lot of times women in our congregation don't feel like they have permission to be that person. Like they don't necessarily feel like that's their role or their responsibility because they've never been asked to do outreach, because that's that guy's job over there. It's not my job. Mm-hmm. And so they don't necessarily see themselves as able to even be in that role. So I just, throw that out there to you to kind of understand sometimes where women are at within your pews, that they would like to do more, but they've not been given permission to do more. So they stay in their place. Mm-hmm. And I'll share this with you too. So I just was on the Missouri Synod has a group, and I can't think of the name right now, but it's basically a women's leadership group for Missouri Synod women. And there was a video on there, and I was kind of surprised, and it was just a little segment. She was talking about how this organization had been important to her. And she said, let's face it, the Missouri Synod is a man's organization. And my heart got heavy on that she would even think that, the church, the body of Christ, it's supposed to be all of us working together to carry out the mission. But that's sometimes where the mindset of women are in your church. I mean, and Mary Beth and I have both been empowered to go out and let your light shine. And so sometimes it's just about providing that permission to say, hey, you know, maybe you've been holding back because you don't think that this is your place, but it is all of our places. And so that's one of the things that really has helped to turn things around at Trinity in regard to who's responsible for outreach. Because just like you mentioned, being introverted, right? Some people prefer to do tasks and be behind the scenes, where some people love people and they would much rather interact with people than be asked to do the tasks. And so when we're wired to be the task person or the person who's just getting things done, we can start to build our ministries and our churches around programs and forget about the people, you know. But if you don't have the people, you're never, what's the purpose of the programs? Mm-hmm. So I just share that with you because I think sometimes we don't even see it. I'll also tell another story out of school a little bit. While I was down at another church doing a presentation, there was one lady who was instrumental in the startup of their church. She and her husband were kind of some of those founding core people. And she said that she and the pastor had butted heads continually. And so she quit trying. And it turned out that she may very well be their member ministry coordinator, but she just quit trying because she didn't feel like she had permission to even speak into the work that the church was trying to do. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that advice, and knowing our people and our history. We're in like the Missouri Synod area, and we have a lot of former Missouri Synod members that kind of left Missouri because of things were going bad in the 70s. And knowing our history, there's been a lot more harder traditions and stubbornness on some traditions there, and possibly that is with the roles. Currently, and we're a smaller congregation, so I know our people pretty well.
Yeah.
And our evangelism, we had an evangelism committee, which our evangelism chairman opened up to everybody. He wanted everybody there, which has been very good. And then it just kind of fell off. There were people that just weren't interested in it.
Yeah.
And knowing our people, we don't necessarily have a lot of outgoing personalities.
Okay.
And so, I've talked to some ladies, and they've expressed that they would rather not be around a lot of people too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate your advice on that, and just like talk about empowerment and giving permission to do things, and that's what we're trying to do with some of the new bylaws too. Is we've removed a few things from the council so that more people can serve it, such as a treasurer or financial secretary, or those that may have those gifts, which were, according to our bylaws and Constitution, we're limited to men.
Gotcha.
So we're trying to open it up for more opportunities to serve.
That's awesome. So at another church that I was just at, so I've been getting around. I would love to come and do it for your church, to take them through the Shape to Serve class, because you guys are small. I think that there would be tremendous value. So when we do that, we watch things bubble up in people. Like, you mean we could think about, you mean we could, possibly. And this last time we had one guy who's been involved at their church. He's been a member for 10 years. And I said something about, so I want you guys to think about how this will impact the people sitting in the pews. And his name was Ben, and Ben raised his hand. And he says, I'm that person. I've been the person sitting in the pews. And I said, so Ben, what were your top gifts? Well, number one for him was hospitality. He said, I'm just frustrated because there's no fun in this church. And I'm like, interesting, Ben, because you know what? You are the fun person. You're the person that's designed to bring the fun and designed to bring the energy. Tell me what you do, Ben. Oh, I work at a golf course. I'm like oversee everybody at the golf course. And so as Mary Beth is talking about, where are the people, but again, do they feel like they can bring fun to the church? Because that's not what the church presents as, they feel like they have to stay in the mold rather than allowing themselves to be who they are. I said, Ben, let's talk about it. So I actually did the guide session with Ben and said, so Ben, you have a heart for kids and you have a heart for men. Let's talk about some of the things that you could do within this church to bring some of that fun that is on your heart to see here. And he said, we talked about things with everything from running the church picnic for the group and bringing in all kinds of fun activities to the idea of starting a men's golf league. That's one of the things he's passionate about. How could they have fellowship and help grow their relationships with one another? And I was like, oh, Ben, I see big things for you. And he was so excited to be allowed to step into those kinds of ideas. Alongside of him was this lady, Cindy, who I thought the two of them were married, but they were not. That's a whole nother Lori Lorig story. But in that process, she started saying, well, my job is leadership development as a profession. That's what I do. And so we had talked about no healthy conflict within the church, where people can actually share ideas. And she was like, I would love to help the group talk through that, but that was not something that she ever would have had the opportunity to do on her own had she not had those conversations. So it just goes to show you how the body of Christ, that we need every part. So I've diverged. I got to bring us back to the outreach piece,
Yeah.
but I think we can just kind of really see how sometimes we're just not empowering the right people. We're not helping them identify what their gifts are and how they can be used within the church.
Can I just add one thing to that? When you talked about the ones that maybe don't want to be the part of the outreach piece, we have them at Trinity, and those are my ones that prep the little bags for the parades. They're the ones that are stapling the little flyers together. They're the ones that help me prep my go-to Bibles. So I have things for them. And Pastor Italiano has shared with me, he goes, Mary Beth, you're having members help that have never helped in any capacity. He goes, I don't know how you do it. I said, I asked them. I know who they are. I know them. I mean, you know what I mean? I know them. So again, it's an intentional. When I see them every single Sunday, hey, would you be willing to help me prep 4,000 bags for the Christmas parade? Right?
Yeah.
And I have a whole little group of them, 12 of them, whatever it is. And so it's okay to have that personality, right?
Yeah.
Like Lori said, look for that chatty Cathy. That one chatty Cathy maybe can build on some more chatty Cathys. Or she might have friends that might just come along.
Or you might just need the one chatty Cathy that's asking the other people, hey, would you guys do this behind the scenes piece for me?
To inspire. Yeah.
You don't need too many chatty Cathys. You don't need too many leaders. You just need the leaders to get the other people to help with the behind the scenes stuff too.
Absolutely.
So Mary Beth, we're going to talk about things that you do inside the walls
Okay.
at church. And we've already kind of touched on the idea of greeting. And we touched a little bit on visitor follow-up. Is there anything else that you want to add on that visitor follow-up?
Really, the biggest thing about the visitor follow-up is just the intentional continuing to touch them. And if they've worshiped once, I have that window of about 14 months. If they don't come back to church in 14 months, then I don't continue to send the newsletter and all of that. I still will send the things pertaining to children, but not so much the worship piece. Do you want me to talk about the Bible information classes?
Yeah, let's talk about that, Mary Beth.
Okay. We no longer call them the BIC class, we call it Starting Point. And so if they're interested in membership on the card, I talked about sending the initial card. I also make a phone call to them. And on our website for Trinity, Pastor has a little message about anyone that's interested for in being part of the Trinity family. I share with them to review that. And that piece on Be Our Guest also has like a registration form or an information form where they want to partake in a class. So I share with them when our next class is going to be, and I intentionally follow up with them as that date gets closer. So once classes start, I partner with the families as a liaison to pastor with, if they need childcare, we provide childcare. It was in-house, but with COVID, we would pay them to pay a sitter. We would subsidize for them to get a babysitter if they needed it in their own home. When COVID's done, we have our nursery here at church where we have someone volunteering to be in the nursery that particular day for the class. And then in addition to that, I provide a meal for them. Our starting point classes start right after our third service. So they come in, they come from worship, they come in, they get their lunch, they get their seat, and then they're ready when pastor comes to get the class started. And I also attend all the classes. I find much joy in that. For one, if maybe it's the first time they're learning, it gives me great excitement for them to learn and ask questions and to be engaged. And in addition to that, it also continues the partnership of if they have questions or something specific, I kind of hand that off to pastor and then I get back to them with the answer. If they miss a class, we have them all recorded. So I send them the links. If pastor has them homework that he wants them to do, I send them the links for the homework. So it's kind of just a partnership back and forth where it's not all on Pastor Italiano. I kind of take that piece from him.
Yeah, Mary Beth, and you made the comment of be our guest. And one of the things I often think about in things that I've learned about outreach and assimilation, a lot of times we can even learn from places like Disney. When you said, be our guest, I hear the words, right?
Yeah.
How do you go above and beyond to make somebody feel welcome and create that environment that is just friendly? And food always helps with that, right?
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
as you talk about having a meal there for them, and that takes extra effort on our part for sure,
Yeah.
to make sure that people are going to be fed. But, if you're sitting someplace on a Sunday morning and you haven't eaten yet, that does get uncomfortable, And so just, again, providing them that extra little piece. And then Mary Beth is the comfortable person to go and say, Mary Beth, we're not going to be here. What do we do? Because pastors sometimes are still viewed as the guy, like the main guy, like, we don't necessarily want to tell you everything like right up front because you might think less of us because we're going to go to the football game on Sunday instead of come to Bible class, because.
And they do that. They do that.
Yes, exactly. But we might not want to say that to pastor,
Exactly.
but we might say it to Mary Beth.
Yeah.
And because she might get it, because you should just, we view our pastors as, these guys that would never put anything before God. And we're still putting football before God because they're Packers tickets, for heaven's sake, right? Whatever the case might be. So that just creates an easy spot for them too, with Mary Beth, I think. And then she does do that liaison thing. And of course, wanting to build that bridge. You're in a much smaller situation than we are, with 1,000 people. So I'm sure, Nate, you have a much closer relationship. But as you're bringing new people in, they still see you as that guy, that they don't want to disappoint.
And at the same time, though, if I feel one of the new members going through the class, I don't want this to sound. I feel most of the time I have a pretty good pulse of people, probably because of being in management for 25 years at the bank. I can sense things. If I really feel that it needs to be Pastor Italiano or Pastor Cook, I do a warm handoff. No questions asked. But you can usually sense that. At least that's been my experience. But it's just nice to have that extra person. And I also am intentional of the very first class we have. I let the council know, Sunday, we're starting our first class. If you could come to worship at 11 o'clock and pop your head in at Fellowship Hall and just come in and introduce yourself and welcome them, that's outstanding. And I do the same thing when we have our Welcome Pineapple Sunday. I do the same thing. I'm intentional about letting the council know, the Board of Outreach know, they're going to come up before the congregation at 11 o'clock. Can you please worship at 11 o'clock that day? And then be with your families out, in the, I'm going to say the coffee court area or the exit area of church, to have a conversation with them, welcome. So I'm very intentional, Pastor. And, and I don't want our counselor or board to think, what do you think, Mary Beth? We don't know to do that. But I want to invite them to come to that service, because with 3 services, their regular worship might be 9:30. Excuse me. And I want them to come to 11 o'clock if it works for them, to help greet those families.
Yep. And unfortunately too, people that are in those leadership roles, they lose sight of that kind of stuff because it's not their primary focus. Even though they know that it should be important, Mary Beth making that connection for them just intentionalizes it and gives that nice reminder that, hey, here's your opportunity. Oh yeah, we want to be there, So that intentional word is huge all the way across the board on everything Mary Beth does. Mary Beth, you talked a little bit on Pineapple Sunday. So that's our when people join and go before the congregation. And Mary Beth is up there with a pineapple. She's got a pineapple for them. And she's got one other thing that we call our go-to Bible. Can you tell Pastor Brenner a little bit about how and where and why?
Absolutely. When I started in this role, I had shared to the Board of Outreach, do we give our new members a Bible? And they said, we don't. And I said, I really would like our new members to have a Bible. And I said, and I know, we probably all have them. I said, but I just envision them being in front of the congregation and pastors welcoming, Pastor Taliano was in these meetings, that you're welcoming them. And I would like to present them with a Bible and your encouragement. You write a little message to them inside of the front cover and present that to them as a family. So they were going to think about it. So I no sooner presented that at a meeting, and I was having a conversation with Lori that was something I wanted to do. And just to share with you, Pastor, that, Lori and Al were very supportive with me being in this role as new, right? I mean, I kind of was creating this role. I didn't have a template to go by. And Lori had shared with me that she had just seen this, they called it, I think, an exploding Bible. We changed it to a go-to Bible because we didn't like that piece of it. But so, Pastor, what that looks like is, I have one here that it has a little guide per se, or an index that I glue inside the Bible, and I can send you these links, but all these different colored tabs all stand for different things. So for example, if you want Bible verses on anxiety or fear, there's encouragement and hope, grace and forgiveness, who is Jesus, who I am in Christ, living out my faith, giving thanks in all things. So they're all color coded. So if you wanted something on who is Jesus, everything here in the red, all these red tabs are all scripture verses on who is Jesus. And then I'll just show you a page really quick that shows you 2 of the tabs, and then the verses are highlighted. So for someone that has gone through our classes for 7 weeks, and maybe that's their first exposure to God they're going home with this Bible that's all prepared for them. It has every verse highlighted, every tab color, and I was just thrilled. I mean, that conversation, that, you know, you talk about divine intervention. I mean, God just brought Lori my way that day, and it was just a conversation like, Lord, they're going to think about it. They didn't tell me no, they didn't tell me yes, they just wanted to think about it because it hadn't been done. And once I showed them this, we were ready. So I think that first week or that first class, I had 2.5 weeks to get 7 Bibles ready. So, and each one takes about 8 hours. It's a commitment, but I have intentionally invited my Bible prep people to Pineapple Sunday. And I intentionally tell them after they've gotten their Bibles, you know, Eric and Treva, I'd like you to meet Carol. She did your Bible. And I do one too, you know, and I select who I'm going to pick, usually for a reason, but it doesn't really have any bearing on it. But we have had brand new members on Facebook say, look what my new church family gave me. And they'll say, we have a written message from Pastor. So it's work, but it's a lot of fun. And I have everything ready here at church. I have the Bibles pre-ordered. I have the tabs. I have the highlighters. I have a template with every page that they need to mark. So they don't have to like look, but they're still reading and they're highlighting. And I've had people that have prepped them do their own. I've had them come to me and buy Bibles and they've given them to family members. I've had members come up to me and say, Mary Beth, I want one. So usually what I tell them is you prep me one and then you can have one too. I kind of get a little deal out of it.
Leave it to Mary Beth.
And in addition to that, Pastor, this past confirmation class, Pastor Italiano had me meet with all the parents, and the parents did one for their confirmand child. So it's growing.
Yeah. And that message in the front is so special. And, you know, as people that haven't, you know, even Mary Beth, I think you'd agree with me, you know, people that we went to school with that haven't been in their Bible, just find that so helpful to have that 911, that emergency go-to, where are the passages that kind of help me see in God's word what he says about certain things. It's just been a blessing all the way around. I will also share with this, with you, Nate, the fact that you said you're in the Missouri Synod area. That actually came from a Missouri Synod female staff minister that she shared with me when she interviewed me for the Siebert Foundation. I spoke at Change or Die, and she was my interviewer, and somehow or another, she just randomly shared that idea with me that there was one of the things that they did at their church. So just again, another kind of how God's hand was in all of it in unfolding that. So Mary Beth, I think the other thing that I know that you do is that you're really good about being intentional about telling us beforehand what's going to happen and also afterward what's happened. So can you talk a little bit about things you've done to share things that have been outreach involvement where people can see, oh, well, that kind of looked fun. I didn't, you know, maybe participate in that, but I still get to see the results of maybe what happened?
I would say probably the in-house would be the newsletter. You know, the following month I'll highlight, you know, how many homes we went to for the reverse trick-or-treat trail, or how many bags of candy we went through. Out of house, I'm very intentional about putting things on my Facebook post just because I have all my connections through the school district and Kiwanis and people that are not all part of the Trinity family. So I think those two keys are the most, and a lot of times I'll have people comment back, you know, oh, that's so great, or what a good idea, or I want to be part of that caravan next year. So yeah.
So Mary Beth, one of the things we didn't touch on was the live nativity. And I know you did a lot of publicity on that end, but you also partnered with a neighbor church to pull that off. And as Nate says, yeah, there's a bigger church in town and we're the little guys. But you know, that idea of where can you partner up and maybe make an impact in the community and do it together. So I just wanted to kind of throw that idea out there. As our parade got canceled, right, Mary Beth?
Yes.
You decided, how do we take the story to the streets, literally?
Yeah, so we partnered with Zion and did a live nativity. And as you know, Pastor Zion's kind of on a main road here in town, and it loops around because of the high school parking lot. So we partnered with Zion and had a live nativity. And the high school choir sang for it like as carolers. So we had just a great big banner right on Route 1 as everybody's driving through, and it said live nativity here Saturday, and then it said sponsored by, you know, Zion, Trinity, Illinois Lutheran Schools. And then we had flyers, like our church secretary Donna made me some posters, and I put posters around town in business windows. But there again, it was intentional trying to get the word out. And I would say we had about 150, 175 cars come through. So it was the first time we've done it. And, you know, we're in a pandemic still. So we were happy with that. We were happy with that. It was pretty steady, really. We did it in a 3-hour window time frame. So
Mary Beth, I missed. How many cars came through?
Between 150 and 175.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very
And
nice.
they weren't all Trinity either. There again, I was seeing families from Stager, you know, and I had 3 volunteers that volunteered to help, you know, to be an angel or to be a shepherd, that were not Trinity family. They were friends of mine through the school district that said, hey, we'll come help you. That sounds like fun, you know? And in fact, they do have a family member that's a member here, and he commented to me on Sunday how his sister and nephew were in our newsletter pictures, and they were on our website, you know, and they're not even part of the family, and you know, so he just kind of thought that was pretty funny, you know, but at the same time, that's great, you know. And there again, I asked Pastor Italiano specifically if we have a family that participate in Vacation Bible School or the Nativity that aren't part of our family. There is intentional again. I want those pictures on our website. I want those pictures in our newsletter, especially on our website, because they're families from the school district and they're known in the school district. So it just kind of plants that seed.
Yep. Yep. So, you know, we've talked about how Mary Beth does outreach in the community, how she does outreach within the walls of the church. And now we just kind of want to finish up by talking about moving from being a doer of outreach to that idea of developing others for outreach. And we've kind of talked about, you know, a couple things in that regard, that not everybody that's involved in outreach has to be an outgoing personality. You know, there's places for people to serve behind the scenes with outreach, with doing the back side of things. But you also need to identify some of those front people, right? Those people who will be your people person that will start the conversations and engage people. So Mary Beth, you started with some small steps in terms of commitment even. So can you just share with us, like, you didn't ask somebody to be on the outreach team. You just said, would you be willing to? What are some of those examples?
Some of those examples, just short term, you know, when I ask them to partner with me and to help me, I'll say, you know, could you come to church, you know, on a Monday or on a Tuesday and partner with me and prepare those bags for the parade route, or prepare packets for Vacation Bible School that the parents are going to pick up because we're in a pandemic, and giving them a specific time frame and commitment and how long it's going to be. I've found that they're more willing possibly to help me versus just saying, hey, would you help me do some parade bags? And they're probably thinking, well, how long is this going to take? Where I think if I tell them up front the time commitment, it one gives them a better idea of what I'm asking for. And yeah, I can do that for 2 hours, you know, and there again, sometimes I'll have a snack. If it's a morning thing, I bring coffee cakes. You know, I know one afternoon we were working on something and I went to the local restaurant here in town and got some soup for all of us. So I think those are the big, it's been a help, I think, to have a time frame commitment. And
Yeah.
with that other piece, I'd like to, Laura, just to touch a little bit on the ushers too. I say ushers because they're usually the frontline people that are, you know, welcoming people into church. I really like them to have urgency, that there's urgency. If they see someone standing, and I use the example with Lori of, I'm in our handbell choir here at Trinity. And the handbell choir, when we were playing, we always played right after the bells at the beginning of the service. So I'm up there playing my bells and I see this mom and this child in the back of church. They weren't in yet. They didn't come through the door, but they were back like where the ushers stand. And she's looking and I could see her talking to her son. Well, what it was the kids were singing and she was at the wrong service. The kids weren't there. And no one is doing anything. No one is going up to them, you know, and it's not a Trinity family. It's a child that goes to our schools. And I'm like, I couldn't wait to get done with the bells to almost run down the aisle to go get them because no one was showing any urgency to approach them. So I really stress that urgency and developing that team to say, hey, you need to partner with me to welcome a guest or to welcome a family that, you know, obviously they were confused.
Yeah, so thanks, Mary Beth, for sharing that. I think we've kind of touched on most everything else that we have on here. You know, the idea of intentionality is the key to outreach. I think you can kind of see that. Some of those prime things that we talked about, having a point person, having Mary Beth responsible for this, and part of our staff has been a huge win. The idea that she partners up with the community, that she partners up with other people from church, that she partners with pastor, those things are all key too. And even the other local churches, that we look for opportunities to partner up so that we don't have to create the wheel ourselves all the time. You know, just look for other opportunities that are already there. And then that idea of a people developer and small bite-sized pieces for people to just step into to help in little ways. So, you know, we gave you a couple of training resources, that idea that people are the mission and joining Jesus on his mission. I think the wonderful part about that, joining Jesus on his mission, is that it's Jesus, it's the Holy Spirit that's doing the work, and we just get to come along, and we're blessed to be able to be used by him. But how do we take away the fear and the trepidation that's there for so many people when you say, hey, you know, this is an outreach thing and so many people want to go, I don't know what to say, I'm going to run the other way, you know, that we make it small bite-sized pieces for them so that it's not quite so intimidating, and that we always have a partner with them. The idea that how did Jesus send people out 2 by 2, you know, that idea that you're not alone in it and somebody's always going to be there to encourage you. So we're going to share with you some of Mary Beth's ideas that she has put on paper for you. We'll share with you that Exploded Bible concept and the names of those books. Are there any other questions or things that we can answer for you today, Pastor Brenner, on just ideas, things that you've heard?
I think you answered most of them. Just kind of moving logically from community events to those who can visit church, and then assimilating them into church. And overall theme I noticed is being intentional about all that and just communicating. And I've realized that's something I need to do better with leadership in general, and kind of have that feed off of me to have them be more intentional with things. And I don't know if I necessarily have any other questions besides just trying for me to imagine it's a lot of these things on a smaller scale with the size of our congregation.
Yeah.
And with the members that I have, and once again, going back to that shape class too, just I've been here 5.5 years. I know our people. I have a feeling what gifts they have, but sometimes they don't communicate with me. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of skill sets that I perhaps don't know, and how we can find ministries for them, whether that's helping with outreach and giving them the courage to do outreach and getting out in the community.
Yeah.
And Pastor, even you could maybe just start with one thing, whether it's a parade cleanup or, they don't have to be really outgoing to do that. That's just an example. And different people here at Trinity partner in different things, what suits them and what they're comfortable with. And I understand that comfortable piece.
Yeah. And just sometimes it's just getting them to be willing to share a story about their church outside the walls of their church. You know, it doesn't have to be big, scary things, but who was the last person you talked to about something, that your church was going on at your church? Because I think we just lose sight of that. We kind of separate that Sunday morning from the rest of the week, and so we just want people to live out their faith 168 hours a week, just thinking about how they can share Jesus with other people. And it doesn't have to be in big, scary ways. It can be just getting them through the doors. Come and see, the good verse, come and see. Just that's what we're hoping to do. So I hope that this was somewhat helpful for you this morning, and gave you some ideas, and we'll share that information with you.
Yeah, it was very helpful, and just getting my brain going too, and the ideas that you've had in your community. Not everything's going to carry over, but it was very beneficial. Thank you, ladies, for hosting this.
Awesome. And if you want to talk about that Shape to Serve thing, I can come do it for 30 people in one full swoop. So we could get you all done, and you could have everybody's gifts and talents, and you could watch them feed off of each other and start to see the enthusiasm and the excitement that kind
Absolutely.
of, oh, wow, we could do this. Oh, this is something that maybe our church isn't doing right now, but we've got 3 or 4 people that have a heart for this, and maybe this could be a new aspect of ministry that could take off and we could use to reach into the community. A lot of times too, just things like compassion ministries. I know Pastor Italiano just did a presentation on support group for domestic violence, but those sometimes are things that are also outreach pieces, whether it's like a grief share or divorce care, those kinds of programs that can reach people outside your walls just because they can't find it anywhere else. And sometimes you do have the people that have the heart for those kinds of things. We know that the typical mommy and me kind of idea for outreach and preschools and those kinds of things, but there's also ways to meet different people where they're at. So understanding what your unique niche is, who are you trying to reach? Is it young families? Is it, older people, who it is? So anyhow, thanks for being with us this morning. Mary Beth and I were glad you showed up.
I'm glad I got that Zoom link.
So, me too. Now I got to go figure out if my emails aren't going out or what the deal is on the backside. So we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, both of you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.